Hey everyone, it's the weekend again. You know, you turn around and there's the weekend. Amazing how fast that comes up on you. So we're here on a Friday late afternoon. I've got a commitment tomorrow morning, so I'm doing the teaching with you now. Today, well, let me first of all fill in a couple of things from last week where I gave my testimony. Some of you may have been asking, well, what happened to that car that was spinning out of control on the bridge? I omitted that. When I got off the bridge, I motioned for a cop I saw on a motorcycle to go back and help a family. I'm sure he did. The audible voice, I never heard it again. That was the only time I ever heard the audible voice of God. And I think the Lord had to speak like that to me to convince me of who he was and what was going on at that time, because like I said, this was not a church-related incident. I had no idea what I was doing. I heard that audible voice, and that kind of solidified things for me. I knew that was God. And then lastly, when I said I got into the Word 6, 7, 8 hours a day, set up a tent in my parents' backyard, and I was devouring the Way, the Living Bible. What that was doing, and I didn't even know it was doing it at the time, it was renewing my mind, which was so burnt out from drugs. I mean, I couldn't concentrate, retain, memory, forget it. I could barely put a few sentences together. So what happened was, with that word washing over my mind, it cleared it out from a lot of junk and things like that, and all of a sudden I began to make sense, and people noticed that. I noticed that after a while. So I wanted to conclude that with the testimony. Now today I want to move on to another subject, and I told you I was going to share a word about pastors. Having been one for almost 35 years, I think I'm qualified to speak about pastors. I want to do it in 2 weeks. Today, excuse me, I want to talk about pastors, their need for friends. And I want to make it a twofold thing. I want to give the perception of what a pastor needs, and then how a congregation can help meet that need. So here we go. A pastor needs to be a friend to people in his own church. Now that implies trust. I know that. Some people, usually there's two things going on with this. A lot of people put pastors on pedestals way up here, like he's some kind of Superman or she is, and they don't see them in a human way. They think of them in terms of some kind of superhuman way. They are not superhuman, trust me. And a lot of times people in a congregation, they don't want a professional pastor. What do I mean by that? Kind of a pulpit personality, a crisis counselor. When you have troubles, you go to the pastor. They counsel you in the situation you're in. There's nothing of a friendship really in that venue. So I believe that they want someone that they can relate to, that they can identify with. And this is the other thing. If you see pastors on pedestals, or you put them on pedestals, what happens if and when they fall? That's a big problem. Some people stop going to church because they can't trust, or they think they can't trust a pastor. Their humanness comes out, and they're really, messed up by that. But on the other hand, the church, the congregation, needs to see what a man in Bible school, one of my professors told me, they need to see their clay feet. That doesn't mean you share everything with everybody, but they need to see that you're just another person. You're not some super spiritual person. And when they can identify, when they can be comfortable around your being vulnerable and transparent, those kinds of things, they're a lot more committed to you. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking to see if a pastor is real. Are they down to earth or not? Some pastors come across so cerebral, like they're way over the heads of people, and you can't really understand where they're coming from. But here's the thing. Pastors, especially in denominations, aspiring pastors, are trained to keep a distant relationship with the people in their own church. So there's no opportunity for friends if you have that mindset. You think, well, we don't want to get too close to people. That's what they portray, because they won't respect you if they begin to see who you really are. I found that to be completely false, and just the opposite is true. They will respect you more if they find out, if they see who you really are, that you're down to earth, that you're one of them. So, seminaries, especially Bible colleges to some degree, would say, stay aloof. Make sure you stay a distance relationally from your own people. Talk about issues, talk about current events, even talk about theology. But don't make it so personal that people begin to see who you really are, because they won't respect you. And I don't agree with that. I think the opposite is true. When you come across being down to earth, vulnerable, a little transparent, they will respect you even more. So how does that happen? First of all, you have to have a mindset in the sense where you want to be a friend. Not to everybody. You can't be a friend to everybody in a church. Think about Jesus. He had the 70. What was that? It was kind of like his congregation. In the midst of that, he had 12 disciples, mentoring, tutoring, bringing them into closer relationship with himself. And even beyond that, he had the 3, Peter, James, and John, who were invited to certain places like the Mount of Transfiguration, the Garden of Gethsemane. The others were not. The Lord gave himself to those 3 men in a way that he didn't, certainly not to the 70, and even not to the 12, although they probably had access to him in a greater way than the 70. So as a pastor, a leader, an elder, whatever, you want to have at least a few people in your own congregation that are going to be friends. How does that work? You invite them over for dinner. Clear it with the wife first. If they invite you over to their house for dinner, accept the invitation. Hanging out, talking over coffee, whatever, taking people out to lunch, going to a ball game, going fishing if you're into that. That helps bridge the gap between the professional and a friend on both ends. So what's the balance with this? Obviously, like I said, you don't share everything with everybody. Some pastors have been hurt. They hold themselves back. I don't want to get too close to people, but that's not a good idea. Because you know what happens when you do that? They'll find out they've got a professional pastor. He can't really be a friend or friendly, and they leave after a while. I've heard people say, I tried to get close to the leadership in the church, and there's just a wall there, and I'm probably going to go find another church. If you become a friend to some people in your church, that will help them to stay committed to you and to your vision. So they won't be moving around from church to church, which happens a lot. Friends, too, will keep you accountable. Especially in this day and age, I see pastors, leaders, prophets, speakers, itinerant ministers, there's very little, if any, accountability. And they seem to do what they want. You don't want what we used to call a dog and a pony show, a one man doing whatever he wants in a church. That is a flag right there. So, you might say, in denominations, we have district superintendents. You know what those people do? They're there as troubleshooters. You got a problem maybe with some people, or the finances are messed up. You call in the district superintendent, he comes in, and he's got a little bit more experience in some matters than you do, and he gives you some advice and counsel, which is fine. But he's not going to be your friend. He's not going to be available for that because he's too busy. He's got several churches that he's dealing with, so there's no time really for friendship there. You might say, well, what about another pastor across town? Same thing. He's got things he's dealing with his own church. Maybe a couple times a year he gets together with you, invites you over. He gives you his pulpit, you give him his. It's very professional. It doesn't meet the need of pastors for friends. I've heard pastors say the ministry is a very lonely life. Should it be that way? I don't think so. I think it's dismantling some of these mindsets and saying, Lord, I need friends in my own congregation. And with that, we need discernment. We need time, and we need instinct. You will find out who you are comfortable with and who you are not. When you don't have any friends and you're lonely, you tend sometimes to become unteachable. No one's going to tell me what to do here. I've got to tighten the hatches and all that. Proud, stubborn. I've met people like that were pastors, and immediately I sensed in their spirit that kind of rigidity, resistance. People seem to be afraid of them. I remember going to one church one time, having lunch with a senior pastor and our staff, and people were at his beck and call. He would just snap his fingers and they were jumping up. That is not what I think pastoring should be. Obviously, he was probably trained in that manner. And the people to me that were ministering to him or with him, they seemed to be afraid of him. That is not good. So these are some of the things I wanted to share with you. Close friends help keep you, the pastor, on track. And we don't want to be so busy with the ministry that we neglect people. And that happens sometimes, our own families, but also the church, because we relate to them as people who are there to help us in our vision, our ministry. You've got to see them beyond that as people and hopefully as some friends. Now, you're not going to be a friend to everybody in the congregation. I know that to be true. Some people you don't want to be. But then there are some others that would like to have a pastor for a friend. There won't be many, but there should be a few anyway. And when you have that, you can let your hair down a little bit and tell them about yourself. Be a little vulnerable, be a little transparent, see what they do with that, and you'll know how that can progress. Could be a tremendous thing. If not, you hold back a little bit. Maybe there's some other people that you haven't met yet or entertained or engaged with. Last thing on this. Oh, one other thing I forgot. The meals. When I was in the Middle East a couple of times, meals were big with pastors and the people in their congregation. You'd get a meal. You'd eat. I remember in Morocco, no knives and forks. You were eating with your hands and talking. There was nobody on a phone. There was no distractions. The meal lasted for at least 2 hours. You were letting yourself be known, who you are. And I think that's a good thing. The pastors were very open and trusting. That is the key word here. You begin to trust people. You're not suspicious of them, feeling like, well, they're going to reject me. That's no good. Having that kind of mindset, you're setting yourself up for that. The last thing I've seen, and this is a pet peeve of mine, church today, the trend is for pastors or preachers to be on video screens. Now I get it. They say, well, he can be in many places at the same time. But what about the need to equip other people for the work of the ministry? Raising up other teachers, raising up other pastors, speakers. A video can't do that. When you have a pastor on a video, a preacher, they can give a good word, but there's no interchange, there's no engaging with that individual. If you try to get a hold of them, the secretary says, well, I've got next month on Thursday afternoon open. They think you want a counseling session, more than likely. Or they'll say, he does a Wednesday night service. Come to that. Again, that is not relational. Okay? That is a pet peeve of mine. I see that with a lot of different churches today, and I don't like it. That's not how I was raised in the ministry. Pastors, I had the privilege of sharing at denominational churches for the last couple of years, not once or twice, a handful of times. What they want you to do is to go to the back of the building or the exit to downstairs, the fellowship hall, shake hands with people, and they say, I really enjoyed that word. That really spoke to me today. Really? What was it that spoke to you? There's some contact there, humanity. Today with videos, you don't have anything like that. And like I said, I get it. You want to spread it out, but next week I want to talk about the need for equipping. You don't equip video teachings, okay? They serve a purpose, but the pastor remains absent from relationship with his own people. That is not good. And I think after a while, that's why people move around. They're looking for human contact, relational, somebody they can identify with, somebody they can be real with, and the pastor can be real with. So that's what I wanted to share today. The need for friends among pastors. And if you're a pastor, a leader, elder, home group leader, take this to heart and pray about it, see what you can do with it, and apply it. Okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Hope this ministered to you. God bless. We'll see you next weekend.